Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce Emily Day and Erin White. They are presenting on visioning lost in unproduced films.
Hi everyone, my name is Emily Day and I'm a senior studying philosophy and crime and justice.
And hi everyone, I'm Erin White. I'm a junior studying communication studies and film, television, and media.
So imagine if all of your favorite movies just disappeared and no one could ever watch them ever again.
Now imagine if 80% of all films disappeared and nobody could ever watch them ever again.
So that is the reality of all early film, where an estimated 80% of silent films are considered lost, meaning that no remaining copy exists. This is due to a combination of the mismanagement of nitrate film and also the flammability and fragility of the material itself.
So our research project is titled Visioning Lost and Unproduced Films, and more specifically, our M-Cube team worked to conduct research on a lost silent film from 1928, directed by Todd Browning, entitled The Big City. The story of The Big City is centered around a jewel heist at a prominent New York nightclub called the Golden Rod. And so in the film, gangster Red Watson plans a robbery at this establishment, but on the same night, his rival gangster, Chuck Collins, also plans a robbery and performs a double deception over Red, leaving with all of the jewels. Now Chuck, who is the owner of an African-American speakeasy titled the Black Bottom, then hides out with his right-hand man Curly in a costume shop front owned by his accomplice and love interest Helen. Now Helen employs a young and innocent girl named Sunshine who isn't aware of the actions of her friends, and she consistently angers Chuck with her negligence around a group of snooping detectives. Throughout the film, Chuck and Red go back and forth in attaining the jewels, but in the end, Chuck outsmarts Red. He gets the jewels back with the intention of returning them to the police, a change of heart that was prompted by his growing feelings for Sunshine, and he makes everything right. Now, Chuck does this with the intention of starting a relationship with Sunshine, but throughout the course of the film, she has fallen in love with his right-hand man, Curly, and they end up getting engaged. So therefore, Chuck ends up marrying Helen, concluding the film.
So our methodology for this project has been a combination of qualitative archival research and video editing. We have collected and examined relevant documents from sources such as news outlets, journals, digital periodicals, film records, film yearbooks, and even the Library of Congress. We have extracted information from these sources to analyze and classify findings pertaining to the film as well as the film's content with the intention of understanding the film's societal implications. Because the film can no longer be seen, we have been using all existing documentation to draw some conclusions about the film's impact. An example of this archival work is our first assignment, which was to read and summarize the film's script. The script was recovered a few years ago, and the University of Michigan actually purchased it at an auction. We then went through a file of nearly 400 archival photos that we received from the Academy Library, and we organized them into a spreadsheet with categories such as scene description, setting, and identification of characters and actors. We looked into a variety of media sources to find documents such as press mentions of the film, journal articles on African American actors from the 1920s, as well as even the film's cutting continuity.
So with this research, some of the questions that we've been trying to answer are, who are the actors and actresses in this film, and why is their representation important based on factors like race and gender? How did this film get lost? How is this film a reflection of 1928 society? And what does this film say about Prohibition-era New York and Harlem?
So since this is a film research project, our outcome is an audiovisual essay. By using video editing and digital technology, this allows us to show you guys rather than for us to read off the importance of our findings. Therefore, we made a film about a film. Thinking long-term, this audiovisual essay will be about 40 minutes long. So over the past 10 weeks, we completed phase 1, which is what we are about to show you guys today. You'll see a brief introduction to nitrate film, how the film was lost, and some stereotypes within the film, such as the representation of race and gender. We hope you enjoy it, and we can't wait to hear your thoughts.
13 study conducted by the Library of Congress. 13 study conducted by the Library of Congress estimated that nearly 80% of all the feature films produced in the United States during the silent period should be considered lost. Many were major Hollywood movies, all copies of which got discarded or recycled. Once they played through domestic and foreign distribution circuits, 35mm theatrical release prints had little monetary value beyond the silver that was contained in their photographic emulsion. Because celluloid film produced before 1951 was made not only with silver, but also with nitrate, the same stuff as dynamite, they were highly combustible and thus presented a serious fire hazard. They also tend to decay, and some films from the era that did survive have decayed beyond any possibility of restoration. Although old films do turn up from time to time, at this point, most of the films currently classified as lost are probably gone for eternity, like the millions who watch them in theaters around the world. The sheer quantity of lost films is staggering. Given their numbers, lost films together constitute a massive chasm in the history of cinema. Yet existing accounts of film history have largely glossed over this absence, or else noted it only in passing. After all, what can possibly be written or said about films that cannot actually be seen? This audiovisual essay combines the methods of archival research with the affordances of digital technology to conjure up a historical past that transcends Hollywood's rather limited representations of gender and race. In it, we look at, read, and listen to some of the traces left by one specific film that is considered, at least by most, to be a lost film, The Big City, produced in 1928 by Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. London After Midnight, produced by MGM 1 year earlier, is one of the most famous lost films ever. Just like The Big City, it also starred Lon Chaney, and it was also directed by Todd Browning. A non-existent cult classic of sorts, London After Midnight is so well known that in 2002, it was ostensibly reconstructed from still photographs that were taken during the making of the film, using a shooting script and a cutting continuity that survived. The last known copies of London After Midnight and The Big City likely perished side by side in stacks of film canisters stored on the shelves of MGM the Film Vault No. 7 when it caught fire in 1965. The Big City is intriguing because its stories, not only the stories the film told, but also the stories of its production, exhibition, and reception, are stories of erasures and elisions that allegorize some of the most glaring omissions of film history itself. In particular, the still under-acknowledged contributions of women and people of color. This audiovisual essay is not a reconstruction. Still images cannot approximate the experience of a motion picture. Instead, it assembles selected surviving traces that surrounded the film in order to recover and envision not so much the film itself as the historical context that would have made it legible to a 1928 audience, and which make it interesting today. Lacking direct access to the film itself, this audiovisual essay weaves together traces of various kinds, some of which are visual, many of which are textual, and others of which are musical. What one can now see, read, and hear of the Big City definitely has its limitations. But these traces, direct and indirect, suggest many possibilities for thinking about Hollywood cinema at the peak of both the Jazz Age and the Harlem Renaissance. The Big City does not appear to survive, but an animated trailer does. At the time, movie trailers were touted by the National Screen Service as a necessity in the big first-run houses and a daily asset to the small exhibitor. More than 90 years later, the short trailer for The Big City is a preview of coming attractions that threatens to remain perpetually unfulfilled, an old new release that we will likely never get to see. The dramatically skewed backdrop and sharply contrasting black and white composition recalls the look of so-called German expressionist films of the time. An animation assembles Lon Chaney's profile, against a schematically rendered urban backdrop that suggests an urban gangster film characterized by stark and jarring contrasts in black and white.
This trailer's juxtaposition of black and white foreshadows the blatant contrast within the writing and production of the film, from the divides between two opposing nightclubs to divisions between races. The film begins at the Golden Rod, a prestigious speakeasy nightclub run and operated by successful female club owner Tennessee, and the setting of the jewel heist around which the film is centered. The film's opening sequence introduces the Golden Rod, which is explained in the script as being a New York nightclub of the very expensive, free and easy sort, conducted once upon a time, and several times thereafter, by Texas Beanon. Texas Beanon, a notorious nightclub owner from the Roaring '20s, operated a plethora of speakeasies, most famously the El Fay Club, which she ran with partner and mobster Larry Fay. A 1998 article in City Journal highlighted that the 1920s setting was ruled by Gotham's undisputed nightclub queen, the celebrated Texas Beanon, wisecracking, sequent, and outrageous. With Texas and her speakeasies as the inspiration for both the Golden Rod and Tennessee, it is clear that club culture was intrinsic to this film, with the Golden Rod reflecting high-class 1920s nightlife and Tennessee mimicking Texas's historic brashness. However, Tennessee's character also highlights Hollywood's ever-continuous erasure of strong female characters, as Tennessee retreats into traditional female tropes during the heist, both crying and fainting through the duration of the crime. As noted in photoplay about the character, the scenario writer, for some reason, didn't permit the impersonator to be as smart as Tex would have been in a raid, hold-up, or anything else, for Tex is always prepared for either or more in her nightclubs, restricting the character to stereotypes of overly emotional and incapable of leading.
Before the robbery is actually conducted, however, the film creates an immediate contrast with the Golden Rod by introducing the Black Bottom, a different nightclub owned and operated by the film's gangster protagonist, Chuck Collins. The Black Bottom is described as being in striking contrast to the luxurious extravagance of the Golden Rod nightclub. This is a basement place of painted brick walls, of bare tabletops without linens. Most of the patrons are chocolate swells out with their ladies. There is a blatant distinction between the club's script descriptions, where the Golden Rod is touted as pristine and classy, and the Black Bottom is seen as more underground. This is reflected in Cedric Gibbons' set design for the film, as the Golden Rod is an upstairs club, and the Black Bottom is downstairs. This physical and visual difference highlights a social hierarchy with obvious racial undertones. The Black Bottom is reminiscent of a mixture of different Harlem nightclubs, as it is white-owned but comprised of African-American performers and largely catering to African-American patrons. This fictional club brings in different aspects of distinct Harlem spots, including places like the Black-owned and desegregated Small's Paradise, the Sugarcane Club, where, according to the Apollo Theater Foundation, African-American jazz performers mingled with white and African-American patrons, and the Savoy Ballroom, an early integrated jazz club that was the center of popular swing dancing with routines like the Lindy Hop. These clubs were used as centers of African-American culture and dance, which is reflected in the name of the films, The Black Bottom, with late 1920s newspaper headlines like Black Bottom taking place of the Charleston and old-time Southern dance is fast becoming the rage among socially prominent. These popular dance styles became synonymous with Harlem nightlife. While the Black Bottom was brought to prominence by the Broadway revue George White Scandals, with much of their credit being given to Dancer and Pennington, African-American life in Harlem was the creation of influential 1920s culture. The music that aligned with the Black Bottom dance was composed by Ray Henderson and bears the same name as the dance. It is a song to which dancers followed a complicated combination of moves that included stamping, knee-sling, and shuffle steps. Due to the inclusion of a club like this,
The Big City was one of the first films to feature such a large African-American cast. The film and amusement notes explained that over 100 African-American actors were called out by Charles Butler, who was the colored manager of the Central Casting Bureau office. The Central Casting Bureau office, founded by Will H. Hayes, was an extension of the Association of Motion Picture Producers. This group established a separate division to control the employment of black extras working in white Hollywood, and this division is believed to have been an offshoot of an earlier effort launched by African Americans who had established their own cinema auxiliary, referred to as Filmmen's Colored Casting Bureau. Charles Butler was associated with the cinema auxiliary, but ultimately worked for the Bureau with duties that included collecting, classifying, and distributing African American extras. In Charlene Register's African American extras during the 1920s and 1930s, she explains that African American extras depended on the Central Casting Bureau office, whose efforts resulted in laws to regulate earnings and to ensure that some accommodations to which they were entitled were provided. For African Americans, being employed in white Hollywood meant being employed as an extra. Typical for the time, African American employment patterns as actors were generally confined to subordinate and demeaning roles, such as maids, butlers, or islanders, in order to formulate constructions of whiteness and blackness on the screen. In the big city, however, these actors played dancers and patrons during a night out, visible and happy in many other scenes. This was an opportunity for African Americans to be represented in a much more equal and normalized way. Due to the film's context, 1920s Prohibition era New York, the inclusion of an African American speakeasy provides the opportunity for a new visibility and representation of the African American community.
Okay, thank you everyone. So that video was the culmination of my and Emily's work throughout the summer, and we're really excited that we got to share that with you. A few quick acknowledgements. We just wanted to thank our M-Cubed team for being so supportive and great, especially our mentor, Professor Matthew Solomon, who gave us so much direction and guidance throughout this process, and we really appreciated working so closely with him. Also, the UROP office, Luciana, Jeremy, Angelica, and Jaren were all super helpful throughout this whole thing, and we really appreciate their contributions. And the Department of Film, Television, and Media, which let me and Emily work in various spaces and hallways and meeting rooms throughout the whole summer. And we have a few minutes left, so if anyone has any questions about the film or the project, feel free to ask those now.
Great project. Just to create any audiovisual essay is immense work. To do that with all the research you guys did is really fantastic. The question I have for you is, one, why this film? Given that so much is lost, could you just explain and sort of justify why this film?
Well, we were actually assigned the film, but I mean, from what we've found so far, we're thinking of probably the film's content, because it was during a time, came out during the 1920s, so it was when racial tropes were a huge thing. It was during Prohibition. Women were fighting for their rights, and we can see a lot of that within the film, so we think that that's super important.
Yeah, the reflections of race and gender in this film, a film from 1928 that has over 100 African American extras, is a noticeable film by any means, and also the story of it by itself came at a time where gangster movies were on the rise, and this one had a specific twist and push on Harlem nightlife, club culture, and all of these different kind of 1920s ideas. So it's a film that's been really interesting to our mentor for a really long time, and U of M just actually was lucky enough to get the only, pretty much well-known, the only copy of the script, so it kind of jump-started this project.
read about the Harlem Renaissance itself, considering that the film deals with the Harlem Renaissance so much?
Yeah, so we, the Harlem Renaissance in specific, we read a lot of journal articles about it. So just varying accounts of the different nightclubs kind of varies from like what has a lot of research done about it. So the Cotton Club is a really popular Harlem club that kind of is really talked about, but a lot of the other clubs are more underground. Like the cartoon that was in the video kind of highlights the fact that there were hundreds of speakeasies throughout Harlem at the time, and so we read a lot of just journal articles about the Harlem Renaissance and from various scholars. We didn't actually read one like book, it was more a culmination of different sources throughout the time.
Okay.
What was the craziest resource that you found while looking through all of these sources? Because I know you guys found some crazy things.
The most exciting one was probably that we found the cutting continuity of the film about a few weeks ago, which basically shows not only the script, but like shot by shot the description of what exactly happened in the film. So like really, if we like just took that, we could like remake the film ourselves, but yeah. So that was probably the craziest thing we found.
Yeah, because for the majority of the summer, we only had access to the script, and just reading the script and reading press mentions about the film from after it came out and reviews and whatnot, we could tell that there were some major things that changed. A point of interest that we're definitely going to go into more as the audiovisual essay expands is that in the original script, on page like 85, the idea that Chuck like he has a change of heart and he wants to like get the jewels back and return them to the police, that isn't explained at all in the original script. It kind of says, we'll figure it out in production. He has a change of heart, cool. And so that was really confusing to us. And so it was really interesting to then get the cutting continuity, which has all the final titles, the final shots, and really goes into an explanation about that. So that was a really exciting find.
Is there any evidence that the name Black Bottom was taken from the Black Bottom in Detroit? Is there any connection there or no?
I feel like if anything, it was the other way around.
Really?
But we can't confirm that though.
Cannot confirm.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.